Welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Shields-Ratina, and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training here at MEFA. And thank you for joining us this morning for our MEFA Institute webinar, The Post-Secondary Career Program Landscape in Massachusetts. And I am so happy that we are here with our expert presenter, Norma Ray Alicea. And Norma is the co-founder and CEO of Next Gen Talent. And I'm just so thrilled that we're partners and colleagues, and this is going to be a wonderful webinar right now. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Norma.
Thank you, Julie, so much. And thank you to MEFA for having me today on this webinar on a topic that is really critical, given all the things that we're seeing happening in the field with counseling, with students in society. So thank you for having me. And thank you to all of you who are joining us today. It's always such a pleasure and an honor to see advisors of young people who are doing the hard work, right, that so many of us talk about all the time and see and read in news articles. Thank you for the work that you do every day with our students. So today is on the topic of post-secondary career programs in Massachusetts, what that landscape, what that universe looks like. And when I talk about post-secondary career programs, I'm speaking specifically about post-secondary programs that are career focused, right? So I will give a little introduction of myself. Again, my name is Norma, and I am a native of Boston, of Jamaica Plain, the neighborhood of Jamaica Plain, specifically in Boston. So I'm really proud to be doing this work in my own backyard and for my own backyard. I grew up in the Boston public school system and ended up working at a community-based organization that served low-income Latinx students from basically middle school to high school. Did a lot of tutorial sort of program work with them after school, mentoring, that kind of thing, and really loved that work. In that work as a teacher, I was able to work very closely with the college counselors, we called them back then. We didn't have this sort of wider vision of post-secondary, which I'm glad we have now. And really loved that work and loved working closely with them, but started to realize that there were quite a few sort of information gaps in the way that we were advising students. And one of them was noticing that we weren't as well versed on how to speak with young people about these career-focused post-secondary programs, right? So ones that were really specific to train you to a certain kind of job or career. And also that we didn't know enough about how to talk with students about the admissions processes of these programs, like how do I sort of demystify that process for students. We also, we felt very confident in talking with students about four-year liberal arts type programs, but not so much, these sort of voc tech or tech voc, if you want to call them, pathways. And I realized that we weren't really serving all of our students well if we weren't able to speak to all of those kinds of programs, right? Because our students have career interests that are as diverse as they are. And so we need to respect that diversity of interests. So that's what we're here to talk about today, and I'm really excited to share this information with you. I want to make it as interactive as possible, but I know we have a lot of people on the call, so I'm going to be doing some activities. I'll be kind of shouting out some of the activities for you to do on your own, and then we can always have some conversation after the activities are done. So with that, let's get started. So I wanted to start off with a quick sort of trivia game and just a few questions to kind of see what your understanding is of the lay of the land here. And, again, we have folks from all over the state here, so understandably, we're not going to know everything, and that's okay. I probably would have gotten all of these wrong if I didn't do this work and didn't have to know this stuff. So please don't feel bad. This is not about making anyone feel bad about their knowledge, but just something fun to share with each other. So the first question is, which UMass offers a real estate certification course to its finance majors to prepare for possible careers as a real estate financial analyst, investor, acquisitions analyst, sales agent, or lending professional? Is it UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, UMass Dartmouth, or is it UMass Boston? So I'll give you a few seconds there to answer, and feel free to write these down. And the answer is A, UMass Amherst. This is an awesome program, actually, where you major in finance, but you're able to also graduate with real estate certification. So you have the opportunity to study finance as your foundation, but then graduate with the ability to work in these other kinds of jobs in real estate. Next slide. So next question, UMass Boston's Bachelor's in Nursing program has a typical acceptance rate of 45%. What is UMass Lowell's Bachelor's in Nursing program's acceptance rate? Is it A, 10%, B, 15%, C, 20%, or D, 25%? And these are just rough estimates, right? It can sort of change from year to year, but generally speaking, what is their acceptance rate at UMass Lowell's nursing program? So the answer for this one is B, 15%. Highly, highly competitive program, right? And a lot of folks who advise students in nursing around the state know this, that it can be very difficult to get into UMass Lowell's nursing program. And so students need to make sure that they understand what the requirements are and what can make them sort of better candidates for admission. Next question, number 3. The only public college in Massachusetts that offers an FAA-approved training program in aircraft repair and maintenance is A, Bridgewater State, B, Cape Cod Community College, C, North Shore Community College, or D, Massasoit Community College. And I know Julie knows this answer because we have talked about this before together.
You're so right, Norma. I saw a presentation recently, and yeah, I know exciting stuff happening with this program.
Yes, yes. Love to visit it in the summers. The winters, not so much. It's the winters too much. But B is the answer, everyone. Cape Cod Community College has an excellent training program on how to repair and maintain aircraft. And this is the kind of program that a lot of students may not even think about, right, or know is an option at this level. And so it's important for us to get the word out. Number 4, Local 41, which mind you is a union in central Massachusetts, and Local 4 in eastern Massachusetts offer an elevator constructor's apprenticeship program. The typical starting salary for its graduates is A, $39 an hour, B, $47 an hour, C, $53 an hour, or D, $60 an hour. And this is about that time when I start to rethink my career trajectory, but it's fine. We'll be fine. The answer, everyone, is D, $60 an hour. So not bad, right? And then finally, which of the following statements is true? So we have a bunch of false statements in here. A, Franklin Cummings Tech is one of only 2 colleges in Massachusetts offering training to become an optician. B, according to mass.gov, the municipal firefighter exam application was open for only 2 months in 2023. C, to apply for Mass Bioed's 9-week laboratory support specialist apprenticeship program, you need previous scientific background. And D, Simmons University offers an accelerated 3+1 bachelor's and master's degree in social work. Students in this major submit an application for the master's part of this program at the end of their 2nd year. So which of these statements is true? The rest are false. And the answer is B. According to mass.gov, the municipal firefighter exam application was open for only 2 months in 2023. And that's important for students to understand that a lot of these civil service exams that you have to take to get into certain careers like firefighting, policing, right, probation officer, they're only offered at certain times of the year, not just any time. So it's important for them to understand that. As far as some of the other things on here, Franklin Cummings Tech is the only college actually offering training to become an optician. You don't need previous scientific background to apply for Mass Bioed's apprenticeship program, etc. So yes, B is the only one that's true. So thank you all for entertaining me with that small activity. I always like to do something semi-interactive and that gets our juices, like our brains going, right? The juices flowing while we're doing these webinars. So to get to sort of the topic at hand, right? Why are we talking about this, right? Why are we talking about career-focused post-secondary programs? Well, I'll tell you why. As I said earlier, very often I hear from high school counselors and other youth advisors that they feel very knowledgeable about how to advise students on, 4-year liberal arts type programs, but not so much about these voc tech programs or civil service, like how do you become a firefighter or how do you get into a union apprenticeship program to train to become an electrician, right? They're not as knowledgeable about those kinds of things, yet we're seeing a lot more interest from young people in those things. And we know that those kinds of programs can also lead to to family sustaining careers. What's the advantage of career-focused post-secondary programs? Well, there are a lot, but I wanted to include a few here today. One is that they can offer different kinds of credential levels, right? So these credential levels can range from just a few months, right? Like you could get a certificate to several years, right? You could be trained to be a physical therapist. That's a doctoral degree program. So you have a lot of options if you're a student in terms of the duration, right? The length of a program and what makes sense for you now. Also, these programs, career-focused post-secondary programs, and this seems kind of obvious, but it's not always, usually provide a clearer connection between what they actually teach in the program and actual job skills that you need to do the work, right? Now, that's not always true, right? There are always programs that may not do this as well as others, but in general, you do find this happens more often with career-focused post-secondary programs, and I think students really like that clarity, right? And that ability to say this connects to this connects to that. And so I have a clear plan. Also, these programs offer increased flexibility, or they can, many of them, hands-on learning and smaller class sizes, which can be really great for certain kinds of learners or learners that want sort of more opportunities to engage with other students and teachers, et cetera. And then finally, they can potentially be faster because they can be shorter than a typical bachelor's degree program, for example, and they can be a less expensive path for students to a livable wage. So why this topic again and why now, right? So, well, there are lots of red flags in these streets, as I would like to say, unfortunately, right? And one of the things that we're seeing in the statistics and in, our lives, right? And when we watch the news and when we talk with young people is that for far too many students, college degrees don't have enough value in the labor market, right? So we're seeing that they're not ending up in well-paying jobs after they've committed, spent all this time and committed this time to a college degree, invested in the money and the time and the effort into them. They're just not seeing labor market payoff. And that's a problem, right? Because we know that for most students, the thing that they rate the highest in terms of why a college degree is important is that it leads to the ability to make more money, right? That's what we see in a lot of the surveys. And so if that's not happening here, that's a problem. We know that that's also especially an alarming problem, and it has alarming consequences for low-income students who don't have sort of the financial safety nets, right, that their higher income peers have. We also see that way too many four-year college graduates are working in jobs that don't require a four-year college degree. So we're seeing that over half of them are in this situation a year after they graduate. And 10 years later, 10 years past graduation, almost half of them still don't have a job that requires a four-year degree, even though they have one. So again, like, what is the point, right? That's a huge problem that we need to start addressing. We also all know the story of crushing student loan debt, right? And not only does that create problems for how we live now, but it also means that students can't save as much. They can't, invest as much in a home or, create intergenerational wealth. And so these are things that students are starting to look at and saying, is it worth it? Is it worth it to me, right? Is it going to build the life that I want? And so this decreasing faith in the value of a college degree, we're seeing it in lots of different kinds of studies. You'll see a few stats here that show, like, Edge Research in 2023 put out a survey that showed that only 58% of high schoolers and 51% of non-enrolled adults that are young-ish, right, believe you need a college degree to get a good job. We also see this was a really interesting survey done by the Hult International Business School. They surveyed recent college graduates, so they had to have graduated in the last 3 years, ages 22 to 27, who are working full-time in business, mind you, in business. Again, very recent study. And they found that 94% of them have regrets about their college degree. 64% wish they'd majored in something else. And 68% say their degree did not prepare them well for their job. So we're kind of in a crisis here, right? And we want to make sure that we're addressing these things in the work that we do and the way that we advise our students. So one of the things that I want to make sure we cover today is that, and this is a message that we want to make sure our students hear, is that there are lots and lots of different educational paths to a well-paying first job. And I want to make very clear what I mean by a well-paying first job. So when I say a first job, some people will say, why don't you say career? Because that sounds more long-term and right, more comprehensive. We're not talking at Next Gen Talent about a career because we're talking about the first job a student gets after they graduate from whichever post-secondary program they choose on this list, right? So it could be a 2-year community college program, it could be a 4-year, it could be a boot camp, it could be, you know, firefighter academy, whatever it is, an apprenticeship. We're talking about that very first job, right? When we say well-paying at Next Gen Talent, we have a very specific definition, and feel free to use it yourselves. And that is that job should pay at least 80% of the region's median wage. So the region here, let's say, for example, it could be Boston, Greater Boston, right? So the Boston MSA, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that would be, in those terms, $50,000 at median, at least that job should pay for that very first job. That's our standard definition. Again, you can feel free to use that or use your own, but it's important that we're on the same page here about definitions. So if you look at this graphic, you'll see that there are lots of different ways, right, and routes to a well-paying first job. And so we can start here, which is one that's very familiar to most people, right? The 4-year college and university route. And, you know, we know that there are public and private universities. Most advisors, most school counselors are very familiar with how to advise students on these kinds of programs and next steps after high school. Same goes really for the 2-year community colleges, right? And you know, we all know that these community colleges offer associate of arts degrees. They offer, you know, applied science degrees, vocational certificates, right? Those can be credit or non-credit. So lots of different options there. We also have the military. My husband is in the military. Lots of different right branches of the military that students might be interested in. But you know, one thing I do like to caution that for as much as the military can be a great option for some students, we also need to be careful that we're not just saying, well, if you're not interested in 2 or 4-year college, like let's automatically look at military. And I think this tends to happen, especially with young boys, right, for multiple of reasons. Or let's say students that maybe feel like they're not as academic in terms of their strengths. And so a lot of times military becomes the automatic like other option, right? And it doesn't have to be there. Again, this graphic shows that there are lots of different options. Again, not that it's not great for some people. I know lots of students that have done very well having gone through the military. So it's another important thing to discuss. Vocational, trade, or technical schools, right? So we know that there are public schools. So for example, here out in Greater Boston, we have a high school that offers like LPN training for licensed practical nurse, right? Blue Hills Regional. We also know that there are lots of private schools that, you know, provide trade options. For example, North Bennett Street School here in the North End in Boston has great locksmithing programs, carpentry, restoration carpentry, piano, repair, violin repair, those kinds of things. Very cool options. Apprenticeships. Now, this is one that I feel most counselors and students don't know enough about. And we're going to get into the meat of this in a second, but it's important that we understand that apprenticeships are a formal program of study. They blend work experience, typically paid, not always, but typically paid, with sort of a structured program of coursework, right? And those can be union or non-union programs, and we'll get into that in a second in more detail. We also have civil service training, right? So this would include things like training academies to become a firefighter or a police officer, right? Oftentimes, again, school counselors don't know as much about the process for how to apply to these things or what it means to be successful in them, right? Like what you need to do to make sure that you're successful in the training. And so those are things that it's worth us understanding and learning more about. Also boot camps, right? I'm sure many of you have seen that there are lots of camps that are popping up, especially in IT, coding boot camps and things like that. These tend to be more short-term, specialized, sort of intensive training programs that are focused on technical skills for a career. So again, if you want to be a coder, right, you go to a coding boot camp, right? We also know that there are professional certifications, right? So let's say, again, we talked about licensed practical nurse. You could become certified in that or in becoming a wind turbine technician. All kinds of different certification programs. We know that there are also licensing programs, right? So if you want to work as a nurse in the state, you need a license, right? So that's another kind of credential that you could take on to become, right, to become a professional or nurse. And then we know that there are lots of really interesting community-based organizations and other kind of like nonprofit organizations that offer their own specific career training programs. So for example, JVS offers a great pre-apprenticeship carpentry program in Chinatown here in Boston. And again, forgive my Boston bias, but I'm a Boston girl. There's a program called Beams that is run by the Asian American Civic Association, and they do a great job training folks, and it's a very short training on how to become facilities maintenance technicians with great partnerships with employers. So again, you don't have to go to a school per se, right, or a college to get that kind of training. You could get it from a nonprofit or a community-based organization. And then others that I couldn't even fit on this graphic because nobody wants to keep trying to look at this small font. And I only wanted these many colors, so I had to be real careful. But the point is, there's a lot, right? And we could go on and on. I could be here all day. How many hours do you have? But we don't want to do that, right? I just wanted to give you sort of a 10,000-foot view of what the options are. But the important message is college is one path to a well-paying first job. There are many, right? And we want our students to be aware of that. So let's talk a little bit more about apprenticeships. And I won't go into too much detail, but again, just kind of give an overview. So apprenticeships, again, are programs, right, that prepare a student to learn a trade or profession under an expert, right? In the trades, that's usually called a journey person, who is the expert who is training you. Oops, sorry, guys. And again, this kind of program combines usually like some hands-on training, more practical training with work that pays you, right? So a lot of these models are sort of learn to earn, right? You're getting paid while you're learning. You're basically getting paid to learn, which is wonderful, especially if you're a student who's worried about money, right? While you're trying to go to school or learn. Really important to understand that apprenticeship programs can be sponsored by different kinds of organizations. It can be sponsored by labor unions. So like what we see with the building trades, for example, if you want a local 103 in Boston for electrician or a sheet metal union or, all different kinds of unions. Or they could be sponsored by individual employers, right? So I could go to my local, right? There could be a local company here that, does electrical work, and they might want to, they might be interested in hiring apprentices themselves. I could go right to them and ask, are you hiring apprentices? How much are you paying? What are the benefits, et cetera? What's the schedule? I could do it that way. That's separate from unions. There are also industry associations, community colleges, and CBOs, community-based organizations that can sponsor apprenticeships. They tend to last between 1 and 6 years. So again, Local 103, that electrician's apprenticeship here in the greater Boston area, that's a 5-year program. Others are a little shorter. So like laborers apprenticeship programs with the unions tend to be around 2 to 3 years. Sheet metal's around 4, carpentry's around 4. So it all depends on the trade that we're talking about. Union versus non-union apprenticeships, again, very important to understand, right? So union apprenticeships have their advantages, as do non-union apprenticeships. One thing I've learned from talking with folks in the field around things like apprenticeships in the building trades, whether you'd want to go union or non-union. And again, these are generalizations, so don't penalize me if you find examples that don't meet this standard. But what I have learned is that often, we know that oftentimes union apprenticeships pay more, right? Because they're constantly advocating to get better pay and better benefits. And that's what makes them strong, is working together to advocate for themselves. They often pay better, they provide better benefits. But sometimes, for example, in the building trades, I've heard that if you go through a non-union apprenticeship, you can learn oftentimes how to work on smaller, more home-based projects in electrical, for example, like how to fix certain things in a person's home. Whereas if you're working with the unions and training with them, a lot of times you're working on big commercial buildings, very large scale projects. So you're not as focused on that scale, on that sort of smaller scale type of work. But again, you would be prepared to work in almost anything, right? But again, advantages and disadvantages to both. We know that people who complete an apprenticeship tend to earn more when they start out in their work over the course of their and over the course of their careers than folks who are in non-apprenticeship positions. And we also know that there are these wonderful programs called pre-apprenticeship programs, which are different than apprenticeship programs. And how are they different? Well, they're kind of like the step before or the beginning step to an apprenticeship program. These are programs that are designed to prepare people for entry into registered apprenticeship programs or other job opportunities. They usually last from a few weeks to a few months. They may or may not be paid. And they can give students a leg up when they're applying to an apprenticeship program. So some pre-apprenticeship programs are very specific to a trade, could be pre-apprenticeship in carpentry, for example. And some actually are more general. So they allow people to learn about all different kinds of trades so they have a better idea of what kind of trade would interest them. Is it sheet metal? Is it plumbing? Is it carpentry? Which one is best for me? So they might visit lots of different training sites to get them that answer. And they also focus a lot on soft skills, professional skills, right? Like learning how to be how to show up on time, making sure you know how to deal with constructive criticism, et cetera. And so those are great programs if you want to kind of start out at an earlier step. And we also want to talk today about training academies, right, for work that could be things like civil service work in Massachusetts. And that would include things like firefighting or policing. You can see from this slide that there is a very, very, very big need for recruitment in these areas, especially because we have some issues around not being representative in our fire and police departments as representative of our communities and their demographics as we would like. So you'll see some of those stats here. One thing that's really important to understand about being able to get into these training academies is that it's not easy. And it's especially not easy if you are not a veteran, if you haven't been in the military. And as a matter of and as a matter of fact, the folks who get the highest preference on the list when they're sort of trying to get folks into these training academies for firefighting are disabled veterans. So first on the list in terms of preference is disabled veterans and then veterans. Now, some of you might be scratching your heads about how could someone who's a disabled veteran work as a firefighter, right? It kind of doesn't, it's a little confusing. But what we need to understand is that definition of disabled veteran is very wide. So this could be someone who had a service, an injury from service in the military, but now has since gotten help and it doesn't preclude them from being able to do the work or pass the test, the physical test that they have to pass to get into the training academy, or they might have PTSD, but it's being treated. So there are lots of different definitions of disabled veteran so that we all understand. We know that, right, there are other recruitment challenges around sort of male-dominated culture. So most firefighter departments are looking for more women to join. We also understand that there can be some issues that make the hiring process for all kinds of folks more difficult. So you have to be a resident oftentimes for these training academies of a city that you want to work in for at least a year, right? And so there are lots of departments around the state that are revisiting some of those policies to see if they can bring in more and new people. When it comes to policing, similar sort of some other similar issues, but also we have a lot of folks who are retiring, and the max age is 65, so they need to be replaced. Obviously, with the politics that have been going on, it's been more difficult to recruit folks. But there are some really interesting post-secondary programs out there to kind of fill some of these needs and gaps. And one of them, if you haven't heard, is at Fitchburg State University. It's a 5-year police officer training that enables you to graduate not just with the police officer training, but also a combined bachelor's and master's degree in criminal justice. Now, I do want to point out, and you can see it here, that you can work in all city and town police departments except Boston when you graduate from this program. So here I'm trying to take Boston out of the equation since I did it so much earlier in this PowerPoint. But it's a great program. You could work, let's say, as also a police officer on a campus, like a university campus, if you'd like. But one of the things that I want to make sure that people know about is these police cadet programs. And I don't know how many of you have heard of them, but both the Boston Police Department has its own cadet program, as well as the state has a Massachusetts State Police Cadet Program. These are programs that pay you. They can be, 2 years long usually. They pay around $30,000 a year. which is not a lot, but it's great because you're getting trained. And if you graduate from that cadet program, where you're usually kind of like learning from, police officers, or firefighters, because there's also a firefighter cadet program here in Boston. You're learning from them. You might be doing some office work, right? In the meantime, you're not like on the beat with the police officer, obviously for a number of obvious reasons. But you're learning a lot as you go. If you graduate from that program, you have a very good chance of getting into the police training academy or fire training academy. And again, unless you're a vet, disabled vet, it's very difficult to get into those academies. So that's a nice sort of like backdoor way in activity. So Boston Fire Cadets, the program I was just telling you about. So this is specific to Boston, but again, we're going to be exploring ones all over the state. This program, you can just keyword search it right in Google and you'll find Boston Fire Cadets. But here is where you'll learn about this program and sort of what it takes to get into it. Right here. Sorry, let me scroll down to see if you guys can see it. So why don't you guys just take a second to read some of this and then we can talk a little bit about it. And I'd love to just hear if you knew about this program before this training today, because I tend to find that like 90 something% of advisors haven't heard of it. I definitely hadn't until I did this work, started doing this work. So if you can't see it in the chat, then feel free to just read off of my screen and I'll scroll down and I'll give you a second. So here's information on how to apply and the requirements. So anyone willing to unmute themselves and just mention something that they find interesting about this program or something they wouldn't have known, even if you knew about this program, something you didn't know much about before, something you'd want to tell a student if they were interested in this program to look out for?
And I will monitor Q&A and let you know.
Sure. Don't be shy, guys.
Oh, I know we won't unmute everyone, but you could put it in the Q&A. Or do you want me to unmute? Let's say if I can unmute people,
Sure.
kind of one at a time. Or let me unmute for a moment, maybe while we have this discussion.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, I can unmute if you raise your hand. Okay, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
All right, I'll also unmute Jennifer. Okay, you two are unmuted. We do have a question also that we can address afterwards about any apprenticeship programs in Springfield, Mass.
Yes. Specific to what? Sorry, because there's so many different kinds of apprenticeships. Do they mean in the building trades, for example?
Yeah, or even, yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
Yeah. We can,
here, so you can clarify something. People want to make sure this firefighter piece is for Boston only.
this is for Boston only. Yes. Yes. This is for Boston only. Yeah. Now, some municipalities may create their own, but this specific one is for Boston. That being said, some of the other programs we're going to look at next are not Boston specific. So just like the quiz, I'm trying to make sure we cover, areas all around Massachusetts and not just Boston. But this is the example from Boston. Yes.
And yes, it was the building trades. Oh, hi.
Hi, is this Boston Fire cadet program also paid? I don't think I saw
It
that.
is. It is paid. Yes. So it pays a little less than $30,000 a year for both years. So it's around 29,000 and something. Now, which isn't a lot of money. It's definitely not a living wage here, but the idea is that it gives them a leg up into the firefighter training academy. And so if they become a firefighter, then they're making very good money, right? So it's kind of an investment in learning while you're getting some money until you can get into the training academy.
S-
It is paid, yes.
I work for a school
Good question.
district that isn't even in Boston, but I would imagine that the the folks who get into this program would have to have the support of their family who can help pay for their living expenses and things like that. So
Sure. Yes. Yes.
just
Yes.
something that I was thinking about as I was, scanning that page.
Yes. That's right. That's right. Yep. Now, that's a little bit different than, for example, like the building trades union apprenticeship programs, right? Which where you're starting out making way more money than $29,000 a year and you're learning while you're earning, right? So those you wouldn't have to necessarily have that situation, especially not after the first year. You could probably, rent a place on your own or, you'd be in a better financial situation. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Anyone, anything that they'd want to tell a student about this program or
And if you
something you found
raise your
interesting?
hand, I can unmute you. That's probably the best way for me to see who wants to speak. Okay, here we go. Jen McGuire. Yeah.
Hi,
Jen?
can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jen.
I was just gonna say that when, I mean, it's probably important to talk to kids about things like drug screening and
Yes,
stuff like that because it should go without saying, but they're teenagers.
that's right. That's right. And it's a way bigger issue now than when we were coming up, right? And so for sure. And one of the things that I should mention to y'all when it comes to the union apprenticeship programs and the building trades, they tend to drug screen not only before, like when you're applying, but randomly throughout your entire program, apprenticeship program. So for example, Local 103 is the electricians union apprenticeship program. That one is a 5-year program. They randomly drug test you all 5 years. So there's really no way around it. Like you have to be clean. It's not easy, right? And so yes, those are things that we have to make sure our students understand, right? And we know that we can stay, marijuana can stay in your system for I think it's like up to 6 weeks. So yeah, lots of things to think about there. Another one that they need to know for this is like you have to have a good driving record, you need a driver's license, and you need to have been living in Boston for the last 3 years. Excellent. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to move on to a different one because I want to make sure that we cover a lot of different ones. This next one is that elevator constructors program that I was telling you about. This is the website for the national educational program, but you can see that from their website, you can go right to sort of apprenticeship opportunities, right? What's the application process, et cetera. And so you can see a little bit more about this program here. If you want to just look it up online, you can just say Local 41 Elevator Constructors Apprenticeship. But again, this program is about 4.5 to 5 years long. This specific one is out of Central Massachusetts, and you need a high school diploma, as you can see, or equivalent, to be hired into the program. But you can apply, right? You can apply from high school. Most of the building trades apprenticeship programs, if not all, you can apply straight from high school. So I always tell folks that you should start talking with students about these programs earlier on in high school. Like, don't wait till 12th grade. Like, start talking about this stuff earlier because sometimes some of these programs, it's a 9-month application process. There are tons of different parts of that process, an interview, aptitude test, written application, all kinds of things, right? And so to get prepared for that and understand, again, those things about drug screening, all of this stuff, it's important to know this as soon as possible. They do pay you to learn. So day one, you're getting paid, and that increases over the years of time that you're in the program, whether it's 4.5 or 5 years. Again, starting salary for this particular program is around $60 an hour, not including benefits. And yes, need to understand like what are the requirements in terms of aptitude testing, prepare as much as possible with those things, find things online to make sure that they practice as much as possible. The other thing, very important, make sure students read everything on the website when they're applying. If there are videos they put up about what they do, where they work, who their contractors are, what they built, have them know about that so that they can speak to those things during the interview process. It really impresses, right, the hiring committee when they're like, well, I know that you did you do the electricity for you create the, you put on the lights for the Red Sox, for, Fenway Park or Gillette Stadium. And I know this, like, it just makes people realize that students or applicants are paying attention and that they really did their research. That, impresses them quite a bit. So it's important to do that kind of work. Another one I wanted to show to you all, and I'll also ask for people to raise their hands here about something they might find interesting or want to tell a student, is Franklin Cummings Tech. This building energy management associate's degree program is excellent. Franklin Cummings Tech is a great school, as I'm sure many of you know, in terms of supporting its students, lots of different comprehensive support services, very good at making sure that they're thinking about the green industry moving forward, which is growing. And so this is one of those programs within the green industry, right? That's gaining more and more popularity. A lot of students don't know it exists. A lot of counselors don't know what it means. And so this particular program that you'll see on my screen shows sort of what this is about. So this is an associate's degree program. It's a 2-year program. And really the first year of that program is HVAC. And then the second year, you're learning about other things like sort of networking, computer-based control systems. The idea about this program is that you graduate knowing how to sort of manage, right, the energy of a building, right? A lot of times big commercial buildings. So you are in charge of managing like the HVAC systems, the electrical systems, things like that, right? And you use computer-based control systems to do that, right? So you have to learn about networking, right? And all of these different things. It's an excellent program. It's a co-op program now. And this is one thing I wanted to mention to y'all. If we want to make sure that a career program is a strong one, right? Then one thing is we want to make sure it leads to a well-paying job based on the definition I gave earlier. But another thing is you want to make sure that there's some sort of work-based learning component. What's nice about Franklin Cummings Tech is that they have that, and most of their programs are going to be co-ops eventually. So the students will get experience working in that work during their training. And then oftentimes are, if they do well, they get hired right as soon as they graduate. So my own son is actually in this program and he's loving it. He graduates in August. He's already working through his co-op at Whitehead Institute and at MIT. And it was so cute because when he first started, he was very nervous. He's never worked worked at a place like that before. He just learned about building energy management literally last year. And he was like, Ma, he was like, Ma, you wouldn't believe what I saw today at work. And I was like, what'd you see, JJ? And he was like, there's a chimpanzee. They have labs there with chimpanzees. And I met the chimpanzee. And I was like, what? And it was just so cool. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, I can't say that at work every day. So, so he's working at Whitehead, and Whitehead has already said to him, if you do well during, your time, in the program at Franklin Cummings Tech, like, we'll hire you. So, so great work. A lot of them are starting out at around $67,000 a year with an associate's degree. So really excellent program. So you can see here a little bit more about what it's about. Is this something, can anyone raise their hand and tell me if they know about this program or if they think their students know about this kind of program? Or is this something that would be really interesting to kind of explore with them?
I just unmuted Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Kathy, I unmuted.
Yeah, please let me hear. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from the field, sort of like, what are the programs people know about? I think this is one of those things that if you looked at this on a website, and I even say this to Franklin Cummings, sometimes the language needs to be a little less, sort of technical so that students understand what this means. And we know a lot of college websites don't do a great job of that. I think Franklin Cummings is pretty good at it, but there's still, some mystery sometimes about like, what the heck does this actually mean? Like, what would I be doing? And so sometimes students avoid researching these kinds of options because it already looks too intimidating or scary. I don't even understand what the description is, much less will I be able to do it. So, and that's a problem. We need to work on that in our field. Anyone, any feedback about this particular program?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi,
I
this is
can.
Kathy. So I did,
Hi, Kathy.
hi, I did the AGC summer program.
Yes.
a few years back, which I highly recommend to anyone who's doing this kind of work with students. I'm way
Yeah.
out in Berkshire County, so a lot of what they did
Nice.
was Boston based, but a lot of our students are also interested in working in Boston. And I can
Yes.
tell you from that experience that both Benjamin, no, this is the Franklin Institute,
Yes.
highly regarded by
Yes.
all of the major construction companies in the Boston Worcester area.
It is 100%.
And so just wanted to get that endorsement.
Yes, no, thank you. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're absolutely right. I have to say that Franklin Cummings Tech, it's always hard for me to say, Tech's partnerships with employers is out of this world. I don't know a lot of colleges that have that level of sort of engagement with employers and industry, and really do the work to figure out, like, are these programs going to lead to a well-paying job? And, you know, so we have a great partnership with them at Next Gen Talent, and many of their programs, like you said, are highly regarded. Their opticianry program is another one that's super interesting, right? So that's an associate degree program. It's the only one that's out here. And it's something that, like, let's say students are interested in fashion. They might not realize that opticianry is part of fashion. When you style somebody's glasses or you recommend a certain frame for a certain kind of face or bone structure or style, right? That's fashion. And a lot of students might not consider it that way, but that's what it is. And so it's important to kind of like break open their minds a little bit and be like, have you considered this? Also, very good outcomes in terms of pay from that program at Franklin Cummings. And you'll see that here. You can always explore on their website a little bit more about their opticianry program right here. And they even have a video, which I always love. Excellent. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to go, I know we're getting close on time. I'm going to go to the next program. A lot of young people are interested in things like, you know, working with young kids. But they might not realize that you don't just have to be a teacher to work with kids or children, right? There are lots of different other options. And so one of them is this excellent pre-speech pathology Bachelor of Science from Bridgewater State University. Sort of kind of prepares students, right, for this sort of pre-professional foundation in speech anatomy. By their last year, they're able to transfer into the master's program because, as you know, you need to have a higher degree, right? Not just a bachelor's to work in this field. But this is an excellent program that you can take a look at. And again, I'm sorry that we weren't able to deal with the chat very well today. But again, this speech language pathology program is awesome. And a lot of young students don't really know about this. It's not something that, you know, you're necessarily exposed to unless you know someone who has like a speech language disorder or, you know, difficulty communicating. I recently just worked with a speech language pathologist because I'm having some issues with my breathing. And there are certain exercises that they were recommending I do when I do cardio. And that was a speech language pathologist that actually taught me that. I never realized that that's what that person would do. So it's pretty cool. And, you know, it's a field that definitely needs a lot more people, just like a lot of things in medicine right now. We have not a lot of people studying enough, and it's a difficult, you know, career path. So not everyone can do it. But it's a great program. Again, you know, this is at, you know, the 4-year college level and higher. So we've explored apprenticeships with unions and non-unions. We've explored, you know, associate degree programs. We've explored civil service training. And so again, we just want to make sure that students receive information on this wide range, right? And not just 4 years it, right? Because it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to do that. So you can see a little bit more here on their website. And this is a program that we know leads to a well-paying job. I think the average salary or median salary out here, at least sort of around Massachusetts for speech language pathologists, is around $80-something thousand. So not bad. And so the last thing I wanted to go through, because I know we only have a few minutes left, is at NextGen, and hopefully you guys can see this. What we do at NextGen, besides these kinds of PD sessions, is that we have created sort of innovative, sort of one of their kind, right, tools in the country to help advisors, teachers, and other staff like you to sort of guide students into, you know, financially rewarding, sustaining jobs. And one of those tools is this, what you can see on the screen, Navigator. We also always provide training. Our partners include like One Goal Massachusetts, College Advising Corps BU, Bottom Line, Blackstone Valley, the hub out there, the Boston PIC. We have a ton of high schools that partner with us, community-based organizations, you name it, college access and success organizations. And the reason that we work with them is because they're able to then use our tools. We train their counselors like you to use our tools to, again, help students, number one, figure out where are the well-paying jobs in their region, and number two, where can you find training for them from this wide variety. And what's nice about Navigator, our platform here that you see on the screen, is that unlike Naviance, unlike, Occupational Outlook Handbook, unlike ONET Online, right? We do the research that you don't have to do to figure out, well, what are the training programs from this wide variety that we know will lead students to a well-paying job, that we know will provide a good return on investment. So we not only do internet research on over 300, now it's over 340 career-focused post-secondary programs in this directory. We not only do the research online about them, but we also interview as many as we can to find out about their outcomes. And then we assess, will this provide a good return on investment, especially for low-income students? So we've done that work for you. Again, very wide variety. So if I go into the directory itself, you'll see that we have these over 340 programs in a lot of different kinds of programs of study, concentrations, fields, etc. And you can keyword search, or you can search by different career areas, as you can see here. You could search by the target occupation, etc. So lots of different ways, right, to explore all of these different programs. Remember, we were talking about that aviation maintenance technology program at Cape Cod Community College. We have it right in here, and you'll see if you click on that program profile, you can print this out. We ask for things like graduation rate. That's not necessarily public information. And then we have all of this information here about the application process, right? Like, what are the outcomes? Where are people working? What's their employment rate? What's their starting salary? So we have a lot of really detailed information that's not publicly available because of the research that we do. That's one of our tools. We have many others that we'd love to show you. If you want a demo of our work and our tools, we're happy to follow up after this. Feel free to reach out to me. We'll send you the PowerPoint with my contact info, and Orkivia can reach out to you. But there's a subscription service based on how many students you serve, and you pay for a year subscription to our tools, and a training comes along with that. So happy to, sort of talk with you all about this after that, but I wanted to leave just a few minutes for any final questions. And for the Springfield apprenticeship work, if you could please send Julie your email info so that I can give you a longer answer than what I can give you in the next few minutes. I would really appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. You can put that in the Q&A if you want. That's wonderful.
Please,
We just
yeah.
have a few last questions. Do we know, is Franklin Cummings a
Oh, can't hear you. Sorry, Julie.
Sorry about that. And I was just
It's
telling
okay.
this Springfield person to, put your email in the Q&A.
Please, yes, please.
And then Franklin Cummings is not a free college, right? That is a private school.
No, that's right. It's a private school, but very, very reasonably priced programs, and amazing financial aid packages, especially for again, for students from marginalized communities. Even my son got some great scholarships that he didn't even apply to them. He just got them based off of his grades. He was like, "Ma, I got a scholarship today." I was like, "What are you talking about? Did you apply to that?" "No, I didn't." I'm like, "Man, so you didn't apply and you got to that and you got a scholarship and you see chimpanzees. Like, that's crazy." So yeah, no, it's an amazing school, very, very affordable, and especially given when we talk about return on investment, it has proven time and time again from its outcomes, which we have looked at. NextGen has that program outcomes for every single one of its programs. That the overwhelming majority lead to well-paying jobs right after graduation.
Yes. Now, someone asked, can you tell us what AGC is from the past participant comments?
Oh, yes. Would you mind talking about that? Was it Kathy who said that?
Yep. Yes, it was me. So the AGC, and I'm apologizing for not knowing what it stands for. And Julie, if you want to email me or share your email with us, I'm happy to send you a link to their information. But
Oh, great.
they are, to the best of my understanding, is they work with the larger companies in the greater Boston and Worcester area to who have seen the reason they came about is these construction companies were getting frustrated with the lack of skilled employees, and wanted to get the word out to high schools and technical schools about the opportunities that are available.
Yeah.
And so the AGC does an externship every summer that is a week long. And it's open to all educators, all public educators in Massachusetts, and private probably too, if any of you are in private schools. And I highly recommend the experience. You get to tour all of the various companies, and they treat you very, very well. They provide food and the voices of different employees. So you get to go to construction sites, you get to go to office buildings, you get to hear what is the work that they're currently doing and what kind of skills they're looking for in high school students.
Yes.
It's very beneficial. It's paid too. It's a stipended position as well. So
Yes. And they're the Associated General Contractors. That's what AGC, just so you all know,
yes, thank you.
Massachusetts.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
And as you all know, there are tons of people in construction right now who are retiring, right? Like, and so they're leaving the industry, and we just don't have enough people to fill those jobs, young people, because there isn't a lot of education around opportunities. You know, I think they're doing a better job of showing up at career fairs and things like that, the union apprenticeship programs at high schools. And, you know, there's more of a connection now, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done so that students are aware of the opportunities out there.
Right. Can I also just add that Mass Hire, Berkshire and Springfield last year? So if any of you other folks are from Western Mass, provides an opportunity in May to have one of those trade career fairs. It was excellent last year, and I'm already recruiting students for this year. And so if you get an invite from Mass Hire, it's well worth taking a day to bring your students to that opportunity as well. And to just point out that Julie put the information for construction for the AGC in the chat.
Yes. Yes.
That's great. Thank you. And I think, did we have one more question? Just wondering if unions share the acceptance rate. Do you ever see that data?
Yes, yeah. So they do with us. We ask for it, and most of them do with us or give us an approximation. But that is not typically public information. So Orquidia's on the line, I believe my assistant director, correct me if I'm wrong. So like I know Local 103, for example, the electricians union apprenticeship training program here in Boston or Greater Boston. Their acceptance rate for years was, especially right after COVID, was 5%. So it can be even more competitive than a four-year college's acceptance rate. I think now it's around 8%. It's one of the most competitive, but you might find like some laborers unions that are around 25%, but they're still relatively competitive. I would say, 20% is on the higher end for a lot of them. So again, I think what's important to know is that students need to have a lot of self-discipline. They have to be good with time management, right? They have to be just very responsible. Like they show up when they say they're going to show up, they're early, they're not late. And not a lot of adults, much less, young people are good at all of that. So make sure that students understand what it takes to get into these programs and to be successful in them.
That's wonderful. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Norma. And
Words, thank you.
this was so great. And I'm sorry about the technical issues versus chat versus Q&A. And so sorry if that hindered anything, but
no worries.
This is great. And anyone, if I put my email in the chat too. So if you want any specific follow-up, just send me a quick note and I will make sure that Norma and Rakitia receive it as well. And
yes, thank you everyone so much. And
all.
again, yeah, sorry, but we got some good questions there and feedback and I appreciate it. And yeah, let's just keep opening the doors for understanding what all the options are for students. And make sure that we meet their individual interests, and that we make sure that they understand that there's more out there than maybe they know about. That's important too. So thank you all so much for your time today. I wanted to end us off with some final thoughts and tips on a few different things, right? So one is when we think about post-secondary training specifically, right? This college or bust or college for all mentality is outdated, right? There are lots of education and training paths that can lead to a well-paying job. College is one of many, as we saw in that graphic earlier. And again, it's important for us as schools and organizations and students to understand that. We also want to make sure that we're really mindful, especially as advisors and teachers, of bias language that others certain kinds of students. So a lot of times when we talk about programs, post-secondary programs that are outside of college, we say things like alternative programs or other programs or non-college, which again can come off as derogatory or condescending or not as good as, right, inferior to. So we don't want to do that, and that's not fair to do. So instead, you could use other kinds of terms like tech voc or voc tech, right? There are lots of, some people say education to career pathway. That's a mouthful, but lots of different ways to not other students and to be mindful of that. And I also believe that it's really important to involve students' friends and families in information sessions on these pathways, right? To counteract that bias and make sure that they understand, like, look, these building trades union apprenticeships pay wonderful money and they offer great benefits, and let's talk about those. And they're not any less than or less important than a college program, right? They're just different. Also important that students understand that college degrees are still beneficial. Yes, they are, but we need to help students identify which ones, right, have high labor market value, which means that they lead to a well-paying job. We at Next Gen Talent have tools to help with this, so please get in touch with us. There's information on the last slide with our contact info. We, for example, created a directory of over 340 post-secondary programs in Massachusetts that we have vetted and we know lead to a well-paying job. So please get in touch with us to learn more. When it comes to career exploration, some final tips here. So when students are considering potential jobs, their interests and passions matter. Of course, we want to make sure that students are interested in what the kind of job and the kind of work that they want to be doing. But so do potential earnings, right? And especially for low-income students and first-generation college goers. It's really important that students use any tools that they can get their hands on, and that you have access to those tools so that they can research what does an electrician in Greater Boston or in Lowell or in Amherst or New Bedford make, right? Starting out or middle of their career or experience level. ONET Online is a great resource where you can find local wages, so make sure to check that out. Also, really important to encourage students to thoroughly investigate any potential first jobs after they graduate from post-secondary. And one really important way to do that is to help them to connect with real people and real jobs through things like informational interviews, internships, and other work-based learning experiences, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know until you're in it sometimes, or you can talk with someone who actually does the work. Looking at websites, seeing videos is just unfortunately not enough. And then finally, on jobs, and I cannot make this point enough. The first job a student lands after they graduate from a post-secondary program is critical. Why? For a lot of reasons. But one of the most important is that it sets a starting point or a benchmark for the types of pay that they're going to be making over time, right? So where you start off with pay, right, kind of sets a certain standard with where you're going to go and how you're going to grow that pay over time. And if you start off low, it's going to take longer to end up high, right? So that's important to understand. It's important that we help students to create and practice a 1 to 2 minute elevator speech when they're thinking about interviewing with employers or for internships, et cetera. And then finally, it's really important to teach students to be able to identify and market their own transferable skills. Lots of students and even advisors will come to me and say, like, well, what happens if a student changes their mind? Or what happens if I change my mind on what career, what post-secondary program? And that's why it's important for them to understand there are skills that are needed across industries. And so you need to know which of those you have so that you can make that pitch in case you do want to make a career change at some point. And so that's it. Again, this is a folder for resources on topics related to our webinar today. Really appreciate your time today. And then here's our contact information. Again, I'm Norma, my assistant director is Orkivia, Next Gen Talent. And thank you again so much, Julie, for your time today, and everyone on the call for your tremendous work.